Chapter 1. The Modern Landscape of Love and Betrayal. Think about the quietest hours of the night. A screen glowing in the dark. A whispered conversation in a parked car. A lingering glance across a crowded room that holds entirely too much weight. Right now, all across the world, someone is stepping across a line they swore they would never cross, and someone else is lying awake, feeling the sudden, cold draft of a shattered illusion. Betrayal is a ghost that haunts the corridors of human intimacy, a single transgression holding the terrifying power to rob us of our relationship, our happiness, and our very identity. Yet, despite its devastating capacity to destroy lives, it is a paradox we must face. It is universally forbidden, yet universally practiced. We live in an era of unprecedented sexual openness, a time when we can discuss our deepest desires with relative freedom, yet when it comes to the boundaries of fidelity, our conversations remain shrouded in silence, shame, and rigid judgment. We demand absolute transparency and condemn those who falter, reducing incredibly complex emotional landscapes into simple binaries of good and bad, victim and villain. But human hearts do not operate in binaries. Love is messy, and the ways we break our own rules are even messier. If we truly want to protect our relationships, we have to stop dealing in flat condemnations and start looking at the fragile, intricate reality of modern love. Imagine a couple who built a beautiful life together over a decade. They weathered financial storms, raised children, and stood by each other through the agonizing grief of losing parents. They know each other's coffee orders, their deepest fears, the exact way to fold the laundry. Then, a devastating discovery is made. A secret email account left open on a shared tablet. A hidden life suddenly dragged into the harsh light of day. The pain is blinding, a visceral trauma that shakes the very foundation of reality. The aggrieved partner feels their past is a lie and their future has been stolen. In the immediate aftermath, they turn to friends, family, and the vast vocal echo chamber of the internet for support. The advice they receive is almost always unanimous, swift, and unforgiving. Pack your bags. Leave immediately. Have some self-respect. Once a cheater, always a cheater. We have entered an era where choosing to stay when you have the power to leave has become the new shame. Generations ago, divorce carried the ultimate social stigma, forcing people to endure silent misery. Today, the pendulum has swung so far in the opposite direction that forgiving a betrayal is often viewed as a weakness, a betrayal of oneself. But what if that wounded partner does not want to burn the house down? What if they look at the wreckage and decide that a decade of shared history, family, and love is worth fighting for? The modern rush to sever ties makes no allowance for human fragility, nor does it make room for the arduous, courageous work of repair and resilience. When we shame people for wanting to heal their relationship, we isolate them in their darkest hour, stripping them of the support they desperately need to navigate their pain. This brings us to a fundamental question that every modern couple must face. What exactly are we condemning? The definition of unfaithfulness is no longer as simple as a stolen night in a hotel room. We carry a 24-hour singles bar in our pockets. The architecture of our digital lives offers an infinite menu of clandestine connections. Is it a betrayal to maintain a secret dating profile just to feel the fleeting rush of being swiped right? Is it a violation to watch pornography interactively, or to share deep emotional vulnerabilities with an old flame over late-night text messages? The lines are blurring, and because most couples never sit down to explicitly define their boundaries, they are navigating a minefield blindfolded. Consider the slow, insidious drift of emotional involvement. Think of someone who loves their spouse but feels utterly invisible at home, drowning in the logistics of parenthood, mortgages, and endless to-do lists. Then a new colleague arrives. It starts with an innocent coffee in the break room. It shifts to lingering conversations about dreams and fears that have not been spoken aloud in years. They never touch. They never cross the physical threshold. But the energy of that connection becomes the oxygen they breathe. When the spouse inevitably discovers this intense private world, the defense is almost always the same panicked refrain. Nothing happened. We never touched. It was just talking. But we all know that renunciation can be just as erotic as consummation. The alchemy of desire does not require physical contact to detonate a life. Desire is rooted in absence and longing, and an innocent lunch can be entirely consuming when it is fueled by the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen. To navigate this modern landscape, we must look at the three foundational elements that give an illicit connection its power, transforming an innocent interaction into a betrayal. The first pillar is the architecture of secrecy. Secrecy is the primary organizing principle of a hidden life. It acts as a powerful aphrodisiac, creating a self-contained universe secluded from the heavy responsibilities of the real world. There is a dark thrill in hiding, a primal rush in pushing boundaries and getting away with it. For many who feel suffocated by the demands of their daily lives, holding a secret provides a profound sense of autonomy and control. It is a private garden where they make the rules. Yet this secrecy is a double-edged sword. It fuels the elaborate strategies of deception that eventually isolate the transgressor and leave the deepest, most agonizing scars on the betrayed partner, who realizes their reality was carefully manipulated. The second pillar is sexual alchemy. This goes far beyond the mechanical act of physical intimacy. It is about the expansive nature of the erotic mind and body. It is the frisson of anticipation, the sudden rush of feeling desired, the revitalization of a dormant, passionate self that had been buried under years of domestic routine. It is an energy that makes a person feel radiantly alive, recharged, and renewed. People will contort their logic to avoid labeling their actions as betrayal, claiming it did not count because certain physical acts were avoided. But the erotic imagination is a powerful force, and when that intense magnetic energy is directed outside the relationship, the alchemy is unmistakable. The third pillar is emotional involvement. This exists on a vast spectrum, from the fleeting high of a casual, virtual flirtation to the profound depths of a parallel love story that feels like destiny. Some will minimize their emotional connection, claiming a physical encounter meant nothing at all, while others will insist their intense emotional bond is harmless precisely because it lacks physicality. Yet, when we channel our most intimate needs, our vulnerabilities, and our deepest affections away from our partner and into a secret space, we fundamentally alter the emotional ecosystem of our primary relationship. To survive the modern landscape of love, we must be willing to step away from the comforting simplicity of righteous anger and absolute judgments. We must have the courage to ask the difficult, terrifying questions about our expectations, our boundaries, and our vulnerabilities. We must look at our own relationships not as rigid, unyielding institutions, but as living, breathing ecosystems that require constant, honest negotiation. This is not about justifying deception. It is about understanding the profound depths of the human heart so that we can build connections strong enough to withstand the truth. Chapter 2. The evolution of expectations. Consider a woman making a devastating discovery several generations ago. She is doing the laundry, perhaps, and finds a folded love note hidden deep within the pocket of her husband's coat. She might weep in the privacy of her kitchen. She might confide in her own mother, whose advice would likely be a heavy sigh and a reminder of the harsh realities of the world. The advice would be to look away, to endure, to protect her pride, but more importantly, to protect her livelihood. In that era, what would she do? Where would she go? A marriage was a lifelong economic pact, a matter of survival, social standing, and raising children. Infidelity was a painful humiliation, a bitter pill to swallow, but it was often regarded as an unfortunate, inevitable fact of human nature. It did not necessarily mean the end of the marriage, because the marriage was not built entirely on the fragile foundation of romantic exclusivity. Now, fast forward to the present day. Imagine a modern woman, fiercely independent, sitting in a brightly lit office with a career of her own. She discovers a string of suspicious charges on a shared credit card or a hidden messaging app on her partner's phone. She does not need this person for her financial survival. She does not need them for social legitimacy. Yet, when the reality of the betrayal sets in, the devastation is absolute. It brings her to her knees. She is unable to eat, unable to sleep, consumed by a visceral, shattering pain that feels less like a broken contract and more like a psychological annihilation. To understand why this modern woman is so profoundly wrecked by something her grandmother might have quietly endured, we have to examine the radical evolution of our expectations. For centuries, marriage was an agrarian and economic enterprise. You partnered to work the land, to merge family resources to survive the winter. You looked to the entire village to meet your emotional needs. You had a best friend, a confidant, a spiritual guide, a community of elders. Today we have dismantled that village. We now ask one single person to provide what an entire community used to provide. We want our partner to be our greatest lover, our best friend, our co-parent, our trusted confidant, our intellectual equal, and our emotional anchor. We expect them to offer us belonging, identity, and continuity, while simultaneously demanding that they provide transcendence, mystery, and awe. We have transitioned from an economic model of marriage to a purely romantic one. We believe that we are entering into a union that will fulfill our highest psychological needs. We want to be chosen, not out of duty, but out of an overwhelming exclusive desire. We want to be the one and only. This is the modern romantic ideal, the belief that finding the right person will immunize us against the allure of anyone else, and that we will remain eternally enough for each other. When you place this impossible, crushing weight onto the shoulders of a single relationship, infidelity ceases to be merely a behavioral misstep. It becomes an existential threat. When the promise of ultimate specialness is broken, it does not just damage the relationship, it shatters the betrayed partner's entire sense of self. If I am no longer the sole object of your desire, who am I? If you could look me in the eye and lie about where you were on Tuesday night, what else in our life is a fabrication? The pain of modern betrayal is the trauma of having your reality stolen. It is a terrifying disorientation. Think of a man who suddenly realizes his wife has been carrying on a parallel life for 2 years. His immediate agony is not just about the sex she had with someone else. His agony is the retroactive rewriting of his own history. He starts scrolling back through time, re-evaluating every memory. Was she texting him during our anniversary dinner? When she was smiling at her phone on the couch, was it because of him? When we were intimate, was she closing her eyes and picturing his face? The betrayed partner becomes an obsessive detective, frantically trying to piece together a new timeline to replace the one that was just violently ripped away. The past is contaminated, and the future they had meticulously planned is suddenly erased. This profound disorientation breeds a specific kind of agony, the dual loss of the relationship and of personal dignity. We see this in the frantic, desperate ways people react in the aftermath of discovery. They swing wildly between overwhelming sorrow and absolute righteous rage. In the past, the sacrifices made for a marriage were seen as necessary compromises for the good of the family unit. Today, when the trust is broken, those same graceful accommodations are instantly recontextualized as foolish sacrifices. The partner who gave up their career to raise the children, or the partner who moved across the country to support the other's ambitions, suddenly feels utterly robbed. The spirit of generosity evaporates, replaced by an urgent, burning demand for redress and retaliation. Because our expectations of love have soared to the stratosphere, the fall is infinitely more fatal. We are not just mourning the loss of fidelity, we are mourning the death of the grand, romantic illusion. We believed that love would be our ultimate sanctuary from the harshness of the world, and discovering that the sanctuary itself is compromised is a uniquely modern tragedy. The wound cuts straight to the bone of our modern identity, leaving us grasping for meaning in a world where the one person who was supposed to catch us is the one who pushed us. To navigate this wreckage, we have to walk directly into the storm of these shattered expectations, confronting the primal forces of jealousy, anger, and the chaotic urge to somehow balance the scales. Chapter 3. The Aftermath of Discovery. There is a specific, suffocating silence that follows the revelation of a profound secret. It is the precise moment the hidden text message is read, the unfamiliar receipt is found, or the long-denied confession is finally dragged into the light. The physical body registers the shock long before the rational mind can even begin to comprehend it. The breath catches, the stomach drops, and the heart races as if responding to a physical attack. We often call it a broken heart, but what is truly happening is the total shattering of a reality. The very ground beneath the betrayed partner's feet simply gives way, leaving them in a free fall of absolute disorientation. When the truth breaks, the betrayed partner becomes an involuntary time traveler. They are violently pulled backward through the timeline of their relationship, forced to re-examine every memory through a contaminated lens. They sift through past anniversaries, family holidays, and ordinary Tuesday evenings, asking a single, agonizing question. Where were you really, and who was actually on your mind? The mind transforms into a relentless, obsessive detective. It demands to know every sordid detail, convinced that if it can just gather enough forensic evidence, the chaos will somehow make sense. This is a profound trauma response, a desperate attempt to regain control over a life story that has been abruptly rewritten by someone else without permission. When the initial shock subsides, it is almost always replaced by a scorching, righteous rage. This anger is a potent analgesic. It temporarily numbs the paralyzing pain and provides a sudden artificial surge of energy and confidence. In the face of overwhelming powerlessness, anger feels incredibly productive. It convinces the betrayed partner that they must balance the scales, that justice can only be served by making the transgressor feel the exact searing agony they have inflicted. We see this play out in the desperate urge to exact penalties, to repossess every treasured gift ever given, or to systematically dismantle the unfaithful partner's life. Imagine a person who has spent the last decade tirelessly supporting their partner's dreams. They worked grueling extra hours, put their own ambitions on hold, and managed the heavy logistics of domestic life so their partner could climb the ladder of success. Then, on a random afternoon, they discover that this very success, the success they helped build, was being shared and celebrated in the arms of a secret lover. The sense of being robbed is absolute and devastating. The betrayed partner feels a primal urge to ransack the unfaithful partner's life, just as theirs has been ransacked. They want to call the employer, expose the deceit to the in-laws, or destroy the carefully curated public image. It feels incredibly unjust that the unfaithful partner gets to walk away with their reputation intact while the betrayed partner is left holding the ashes of the relationship. This furious demand for redress frequently gives birth to the most ancient form of mirror punishment: retaliatory infidelity. The betrayed partner, drowning in a sea of rejection, decides that the only way to reclaim their power is to inflict an equal wound. They might seek out an old flame or a willing stranger, fueled by the intoxicating thought that two can play this dark game. They believe that by stepping outside the boundaries themselves, they will finally teach their partner a lesson. They think that creating a parallel betrayal will somehow bring them closure, or at the very least force the unfaithful partner to truly understand the depth of the devastation. But revenge is a terrible, zero-sum game. The exaltation of self-righteousness is a shallow and fleeting pleasure. Retaliation does not deliver justice, nor does it quench the hostility burning in the chest. Instead, it traps the betrayed partner in an endless obsessive loop with the past. It binds them even more tightly to the very person who hurt them. The bitter truth about acts of romantic reprisal is that they are ultimately self-defeating. Seeking to destroy the other person is not a viable strategy for getting them back, nor is it a strategy for moving forward. In the grim aftermath of trying to settle the score, the betrayed partner often finds themselves feeling just as vulnerable, just as hurt, and profoundly disconnected from their own values. This brings us to the agonizing presence of jealousy. Jealousy is not merely an emotion, it is a visceral, full-body possession. The betrayed partner is plagued by intrusive cinematic visions of their loved one with the secret lover. These images swoop through the mind like vultures circling their prey, completely uninvited and impossible to banish. The mind constructs torturous comparisons. Was the lover funnier? Were they more adventurous? Did they possess a kind of magic that the marital bed had lost? The betrayed partner paces the floor, fists clenched, trapped in a violent fantasy of confronting the lover, seeking that impossible balance between demonstrating contempt and demanding answers. Yet there is a profound difference between retributive justice and restorative justice. Retributive justice is consumed entirely with punishment and pain. It focuses on the narcissistic injury, the loss of face, and the desperate need to make the other person pay for making a fool out of them. Restorative justice, however, engages in the arduous, messy work of repair. It requires the betrayed partner to mourn the actual loss of connection rather than just the loss of pride. It means making space for the overwhelming urge to retaliate but choosing not to act on it. Consider a different path through the wreckage. Imagine a betrayed partner who feels the white-hot urge to publicly humiliate their spouse and the secret lover. They could easily cause a scene, leak the digital evidence, and watch the fallout with grim satisfaction. But in a moment of profound clarity, they realize that allowing this betrayal to dictate their actions gives the unfaithful partner far too much power. Instead of sinking into the swamp of one-upmanship, they choose to elevate themselves. They redirect all of that fierce, aggressive energy back into their own life, reclaiming their dignity, their autonomy, and their joy. They discover that the most devastating response to a betrayal is not a perfectly executed revenge plot. The ultimate reclamation of power is demonstrating that their spirit, their worth, and their capacity for happiness were never solely dependent on the person who broke their trust. Chapter 4. The Pendulum of Pain, Revenge and Secrecy. There is an invisible, suffocating weight that settles into the bones of anyone carrying a profound secret. We are taught from a very young age that honesty is the ultimate virtue, that transparency is the absolute bedrock of intimacy. In our modern culture of constant disclosure, we operate under the assumption that we have an unalienable right to know every thought, feeling, and action of our partners. We equate complete transparency with closeness, believing that true love means holding nothing back. But when the delicate fabric of a relationship is torn by infidelity, the truth suddenly transforms from a bridge into a weapon. We find ourselves swinging wildly on a pendulum, torn between the desperate need to extract every agonizing detail and the terrifying realization that some truths possess the power to irrevocably destroy our lives. Think about the heavy burden of the unfaithful partner who suddenly decides they can no longer live with the corrosive guilt of a hidden life. They arrive home, sit heavily on the edge of the bed, and unburden their soul, confessing a brief, meaningless indiscretion that happened years ago. They feel an immediate, profound sense of relief, a spiritual cleansing. But consider what they have just done. They have essentially taken a heavy stone from their own backpack and shoved it directly into the backpack of the person they love. Before unloading guilt onto an unsuspecting partner, one must ask a devastatingly simple question. Whose well-being is actually being served by this confession? Sometimes an unburdening is disguised as moral integrity and a desire for an authentic connection, when in reality it is a deeply selfish act designed to alleviate internal pressure. There are moments when the most caring, protective choice a person can make is to carry the heavy burden of their own secret to the grave, sparing their partner from a lifetime of sleepless nights and torturous cinematic visions of an event that has long since passed. This brings us to a profound cultural divide in how we view deception. In many Western societies, the deception itself is judged far more harshly than the actual physical transgression. The endless cover-ups, the deleted texts, the fabricated late-night meetings, these are viewed as the ultimate disrespect, a fundamental violation of human rights. But step outside that cultural bubble, and you will find societies where keeping the affair hidden is considered the respectful choice. In family-oriented, collectivist cultures, a gentle untruth designed to preserve the harmony of the home and protect the dignity of the spouse is often valued far more than a destructive, shattering revelation. Imagine a grown child discovering a parent's long-standing affair. In an individualistic culture, that child might immediately expose the secret, believing that absolute truth is paramount and the other parent has a fundamental right to know. In a collectivist culture, that same child might swallow the secret whole, choosing to preserve the family structure and refusing to shame their parents by thrusting a destructive truth into the daylight. Neither choice is inherently evil. They are simply governed by entirely different moral compasses. It forces us to ask whether absolute honesty is always synonymous with absolute love. But what happens when the secret is already out, when the truth has violently breached the walls of the relationship? The immediate aftermath is usually defined by a frantic, obsessive demand for information. The betrayed partner transforms into a relentless interrogator, convinced that if they can just compile enough forensic evidence, they will regain a sense of control over their stolen reality. They bombard their partner with what we can call detective questions. Where did you go? Did you sleep in our bed? How much money did you spend? What did they look like? Was the sex better? These questions are a natural trauma response, but they are incredibly dangerous. Detective questions do not heal. They re-traumatize. They inflict new, jagged wounds and invite agonizing comparisons where the betrayed partner will invariably cast themselves as the loser. They yield cold facts, but they provide absolutely no understanding of the human heart. If a couple genuinely wants to survive the wreckage and rebuild, they must slowly pivot away from the forensic accounting of the affair and move toward investigative questions. These are the inquiries that mine the deep emotional meaning behind the transgression. Did you want me to find out? What did this parallel life mean to you? Were you trying to leave, or were you desperately trying to find a way to stay? What did you experience with them that you feel you can no longer experience with me? Imagine a husband who discovers his wife's infidelity. If he demands to know the specific details of her physical encounters, he will only generate terrifying images that will haunt his quiet moments forever. But if he has the courage to ask what she was feeling, perhaps she felt alive, desired, and momentarily free from the suffocating responsibilities of domestic life, he begins to build a bridge of understanding. This is a terrifying transition because it requires the betrayed partner to lay down their righteous indignation and replace it with authentic, agonizing curiosity. This curiosity eventually forces the unfaithful partner to confront the elaborate architecture of their own lies. Very few people wake up and consciously decide to inflict catastrophic pain on their families in cold blood. Instead, they build massive, intricate scaffolds of rationalization to legitimize their actions. They convince themselves that their partner is emotionally unavailable, that their sex life is dead, or that they are merely seeking a harmless outlet to preserve the marriage. This is a psychological sleight of hand that allows them to maintain a positive self-image while engaging in deeply dishonest behavior. When the affair is exposed, the unfaithful partner will often immediately weaponize these rationalizations, blaming the marriage for their straying. But an honest reckoning requires dismantling these justifications. The unfaithful partner must look in the mirror and acknowledge that their secret life was not merely a symptom of their spouse's failures, but a unilateral, selfish choice they made to serve their own hidden hungers. Navigating the pendulum of secrecy and revelation is not about demanding absolute, unvarnished transparency, nor is it about burying our heads in the sand. It is about an incredibly delicate calibration of the truth. It requires us to understand that while facts provide the raw data of a betrayal, it is the meaning behind those facts that dictates whether a relationship will wither and die or slowly, painfully begin to grow again. To truly understand that meaning, we have to let go of our comfortable assumptions and step into the most bewildering territory of all, the paradoxical truth that sometimes the people who shatter our lives are not running away from us at all. Sometimes they are running toward a completely different version of themselves. Chapter 5. The Paradox of the Happy Wanderer. What if the betrayal that shattered your world had absolutely nothing to do with you? For a partner who has been cast aside, lied to, and deceived by their one and only, this question often feels utterly ludicrous, even offensive. Intimate betrayal feels intensely personal, a direct and targeted attack on our most vulnerable emotional core. When we are reeling from the shock of discovery, we are desperate to understand the mechanics of the disaster. We demand to know why it happened, and our culture provides us with a very specific, comforting narrative to explain it. The symptom theory. This theory insists that an affair is simply an alarm bell alerting us to a pre-existing condition. If someone strays, the logic dictates it must be because there is a fundamental flaw in the marriage or a deep pathological defect within the individual. We are told that if a home is filled with love, respect, and mutual appreciation, there should be absolutely no reason to wander. This narrative is incredibly seductive because it offers a semblance of control. It promises that if we can just fix the communication issues, spice up the bedroom, or send the unfaithful partner to enough therapy to cure their character flaws, we can effectively affair-proof our lives. And to be fair, in many cases, this holds true. Plenty of relationships collapse under the weight of prolonged neglect, toxic conflict, or suffocating loneliness, and the affair simply serves as the final exit strategy. But what happens when the marriage is actually good? What happens when the person who strayed is a deeply loving, involved, and caring partner? The idea that infidelity can happen in the absence of serious marital dysfunction is terrifying to accept because our culture simply does not believe in no-fault affairs. When we cannot point the finger at a failed relationship, we immediately rush to diagnose the wanderer, labeling them as a narcissist, a compulsive risk-taker, or emotionally stunted. We desperately want to medicalize the betrayal, to wrap it in clinical jargon, because grappling with the existential complexities of human desire is far too frightening. But if we truly want to understand the intricate landscape of modern love, we must have the courage to look beyond the obvious dysfunctions and confront the most bewildering paradox of all. Happy people cheat. To understand this, we have to flip the lens. Instead of asking what the unfaithful partner was doing to their marriage, we must ask what they were doing for themselves. When we ask this question with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, a completely different narrative emerges. In countless stories of improbable transgression, the affair is not described as a symptom of a problem, but rather as an expansive, transformative experience of self-discovery. Think about an individual who has spent their entire existence doing exactly what is expected of them. Imagine someone who has been the quintessential good person from the moment they could walk. They were the dutiful child who never rebelled, the straight-A student who followed the prescribed path to a prestigious career, the reliable spouse who manages the household finances with flawless precision, and the devoted parent who never misses a soccer game or a school play. Their life is a masterpiece of responsibility and stability. They genuinely love their partner, cherish their family, and possess an enviable, comfortable existence. Yet, beneath the surface of this perfect architecture, a quiet, insistent question begins to echo. If I am not perfectly good, will I still be loved? Have I sacrificed my own untamed vitality on the altar of duty? Then an opportunity presents itself. It might be a chance encounter with someone from a completely different social sphere, someone who does not know them as the boss, the parent, or the reliable spouse. In the eyes of this stranger, they are a blank canvas. When they step into the clandestine universe of the affair, they are not looking for another lover. They are looking for another version of themselves. They are seeking the teenager they never allowed themselves to be, the rebel they buried under decades of compliance, or the passionate artist they abandoned for a sensible paycheck. The intoxicating power of the affair lies in its ability to transport us into a parallel universe, a liminal space secluded from the crushing responsibilities of everyday life. Within this hidden bubble, the rules of reality are temporarily suspended. This alternative world is idealized precisely because it is contained, elusive, and largely unattainable. The lovers might meet in parked cars, dimly lit hotel bars, or borrowed apartments, navigating a landscape defined by ambiguity and anticipation. This uncertainty, the very thing we would never tolerate in our primary relationship, becomes the combustible fuel that keeps the flame of desire burning bright. This is why so many people choose secret partners who could never realistically integrate into their actual lives. By falling for someone from a radically different background, generation, or lifestyle, they are safely playing with possibilities they would never entertain as actualities. The affair offers a mesmerizing glimpse into the unlived life. We all have ghost ships that sail parallel to our chosen paths, the careers we didn't pursue, the cities we didn't move to, the parts of our personality we pruned away to fit into our current reality. Adultery is often the revenge of these deserted possibilities. It is an urgent, existential hunger to know what it feels like to inhabit a different story before our time runs out. But this profound journey of self-discovery comes wrapped in the volatile energy of transgression. Human beings possess a deeply ingrained relationship with the forbidden. We all remember the childhood thrill of hiding, of being slightly bad, of pushing the boundaries and getting away with it. As adults, this urge does not disappear. It simply goes underground. The risk of being caught, the defiance of cultural taboos, the deliberate shattering of the very rules we painstakingly established for ourselves, these elements create a powerful aphrodisiac. We are acutely aware of the law of gravity, yet we dream of flying. High states of arousal frequently flow from this perilous tension between ecstasy and disaster. When an upstanding, committed person breaks their own moral code, they are often plunged into a state of profound contradiction. They are horrified by the immense risk they are taking, terrified of destroying the family they deeply love, yet completely mesmerized by the daredevil energy coursing through their veins. They will swear to themselves that they will end it, attempting to impose clean breaks and strict no-contact rules, only to find that these self-imposed barriers become thrilling new rules to shatter. They are caught in a tug-of-war between the life they built and the intoxicating stranger they have discovered within themselves. Acknowledging that an affair can be a deeply meaningful, expansive experience for the wanderer does not somehow erase the catastrophic pain it inflicts on the betrayed partner. It is entirely possible for an experience to be simultaneously a profound awakening for one person and a devastating trauma for another. But if we refuse to look at the subjective meaning of the transgression, if we obstinately cling to the belief that all cheating is merely a symptom of a bad marriage or a sick mind, we strip the unfaithful partner of their complex humanity. More importantly, we rob the couple of the very insight required to truly heal. Understanding the existential hunger that drives the happy wanderer is not about giving them a free pass. It is about confronting the uncomfortable truth that our desire for security and our desire for freedom will always be locked in a passionate, agonizing dance. Chapter 6. Awakening from the slumber of domesticity. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. It is the creeping, silent numbness that settles over a relationship when the thrilling poetry of romance is slowly, almost imperceptibly, replaced by the relentless prose of the everyday. You know this feeling. It is the heavy sigh at the end of a long day of commuting, paying bills, managing intricate schedules, and keeping the fragile, demanding machinery of a household running. In this state of perpetual motion, we stop looking at our partners with awe. We begin to look at them as co-managers of a domestic enterprise. We build a beautiful, formidable fortress of security, but inside that fortress, the air eventually grows stale. And then, suddenly, a window is thrown open. A spark ignites. When we ask people who have crossed the line why they did it, the answer is rarely about seeking a superior physical experience. The most universal, echoing refrain from those who wander is this: I felt alive. They describe feeling reborn, vibrant, recharged, and awakened from a long, suffocating hibernation. Many realize with a profound shock that they had not even noticed their own emotional and erotic absence until the very moment they were caught unawares by a sudden surge of vitality. The affair acts as a sudden, intense jolt of life energy, a vibrant contrast to a marriage that is not necessarily bad but simply completely numb. It is an existential awakening, a sudden surge of color in a world that had faded to grayscale. It is no coincidence that this sudden hunger for vitality frequently strikes in the shadow of profound loss or personal crisis. A beloved parent passes away, a career unexpectedly falters, the undeniable signs of aging appear in the mirror, or a frightening medical diagnosis shakes our foundation. In the face of our own mortality, the inexorable advance of time, and the terrifying vulnerability of being human, the sudden rush of illicit love serves as the ultimate antidote to death. It is an act of fierce defiance against the dying of the light, a desperate, passionate grasp for a life fully lived before it is too late. Confronted with the brevity of existence, the compromises that seemed perfectly reasonable yesterday become entirely unbearable today. This brings us to a fundamental human paradox that sits at the very center of our intimate lives. We are born with two deeply ingrained, fiercely opposing drives. On one hand, we desperately crave security, predictability, and safety. We want the steady rock, the reliable partner, the quiet comfort of a shared history and a known future. On the other hand, we have a ravenous, insatiable appetite for adventure, novelty, mystery, and risk. In the honeymoon phase of a relationship, these two drives seem to coexist effortlessly. But as we settle into the long haul of commitment, we willingly trade a little passion for a little more certainty. We prioritize the absolute safety of the nest, completely unaware that the very elements that make love secure are the exact elements that slowly suffocate desire. We want to merge these contradictions, but the adulterous wish offers a neatly segmented solution. We outsource the risk, the passion, and the danger to the lover, while keeping the comfort and stability safely at home. Nowhere is this deadening effect more pronounced than in the intersection of female sexuality and domesticity. Imagine a woman who has spent the last decade entirely consumed by the needs of others. She is the emotional shock absorber for her children, the the logistical coordinator for her household, the caring daughter to aging parents, and the supportive partner to her spouse. She is exhausted to her marrow, crushed by the heavy burdens of caretaking. When her partner reaches for her at the end of the day, she naturally recoils. She does not want to be touched because her body, her time, and her energy have belonged to everyone else all day long. Her partner, feeling repeatedly rejected, assumes she simply has no interest in intimacy, concluding that her sexual drive has permanently vanished. But then, she steps outside that domestic sphere. She meets someone who does not see her as a mother, a house manager, or a reliable wife. They see her strictly as a woman. They offer a gaze that is pure, unadulterated desire. Suddenly, this woman who could barely muster the energy to hold her partner's hand is engulfed in a torrid, passionate romance. Why? Because in the parallel universe of the affair, she is completely relieved of the crushing burden of caretaking. She is not managing the lover's schedule, worrying about their laundry, or planning their future. The affair becomes an act of fierce autonomy, a selfish pursuit of her own pleasure in a life that has been entirely defined by selflessness. She reclaims a fragmented, muted part of her identity, stepping into a vibrant reality where she is awake, focused, and exquisitely alive. The tragedy of this awakening is that it is often entirely segregated from the primary relationship. The partner left at home is utterly bewildered, deeply wounded, and wondering why they could not summon the beautiful, blooming energy that a stranger so easily unlocked. But the stranger did not have to compete with the mortgage, the exhaustion of parenting, and the heavy, desexualizing weight of familiarity. If we want to bring this fierce vitality back into our homes, we must stop viewing the tension between the domestic and the erotic as a problem to be neatly solved. It is not a mathematical equation. It is a paradox that must be continuously, creatively managed. We must learn to look at the person we have known for years, the person wrapped in the familiar armor of daily life, and cultivate the profound courage to see them and ourselves entirely anew. Chapter 7. The Emotional Economics of Intimacy. Think of a person walking into a dimly lit bar in a strange city, slipping a wedding ring into their pocket, and paying for the fleeting company of a stranger. Or consider someone sitting in the quiet glow of a computer screen, hours after their partner has gone to sleep, seeking out anonymous virtual connections. When we witness these behaviors, our cultural reflex is swift and condemning. We instantly assume that the person is a creature driven entirely by base, physical appetite. We rely on a very old, very tired script. People seek emotional connection, but they stray purely for sex. And when that sex is commercial, transactional, or completely anonymous, we take it as absolute proof that love has nothing to do with it. We write them off as unfeeling, entitled, or simply broken. But in the shadowed, complex corners of human intimacy, things are rarely what they seem. If we want to truly understand why people export their most intimate desires outside of a loving home, we have to look past the physical acts and examine the profound emotional economics driving them. Imagine a devoted partner who is the absolute bedrock of their family. They are the person everyone relies on, the one who manages the crises, remembers the anniversaries, and provides an unwavering foundation of support. They love their spouse with a fierce, protective tenderness. Yet, behind closed bedroom doors, a strange and heartbreaking paralysis sets in. They find themselves completely unable to summon the physical passion they once possessed. It is not that they find their partner unattractive, and it is certainly not that they do not love them. In fact, the problem is precisely the opposite. They love them too much. This is a devastating phenomenon known as the love-lust split. For many people, particularly those who have taken on heavy emotional caretaking roles, the tender, protective feelings of love become completely incompatible with the raw, assertive energy of lust. To desire someone sexually requires a certain degree of selfishness, a willingness to let go of control, and a primal, striving energy. But if you have spent your life acting as a shield for your partner, viewing them as someone delicate who must be cherished and protected, unleashing that raw sexual energy can feel almost inappropriate, even violating. The tragic irony is that the closer these individuals get emotionally, the further they retreat sexually. They become profoundly affectionate but entirely sexless companions. They feel an immense, crushing responsibility for their partner's emotional well-being, and that heavy burden makes it impossible to experience the weightless freefall required for true erotic pleasure. So, where does that repressed, hungry energy go? It searches for a vacuum. It seeks out a space completely stripped of emotional stakes, a place where the heavy armor of the caretaking role can finally be dropped to the floor. This brings us to the agonizing weight of our cultural expectations around sexuality, particularly for men. We are fed a relentless narrative that male desire is a simple biological machine, always hungry, always ready, completely uncomplicated by emotion. This toxic myth insists that a successful lover must be an untiring, perfectly confident performer who never experiences a moment of doubt. But the reality is that sexuality is profoundly emotional and deeply relational. Behind the facade of the confident performer, there is often a swirling storm of performance anxiety, a terrifying fear of inadequacy, and a desperate, exhausting need to measure up to an impossible standard. When a person feels insecure about their career, anxious about their aging body, or overwhelmed by the demands of their life, it directly impacts their ability to be physically present and aroused with the person they love. When the marital bed becomes a stage for these overwhelming pressures, the simple equation of a transactional or anonymous encounter starts to look like a sanctuary. When someone pays for an hour of intimacy, or loses themselves in the infinite, undemanding scroll of a screen, what are they really buying? They are buying simplicity. They are purchasing a brief, golden window of psychological freedom. In the transactional space, there is zero risk of rejection. There is no need to meticulously decipher a partner's mood or worry about being emotionally available afterward. The person on the other end of the transaction is not asking them to be a provider, a protector, or an emotional anchor. They are sexually demanding, fiercely confident, and utterly unfragile. For an hour, the wanderer does not have to worry about imposing their primitive urges on someone they revere. They are completely relieved of their caretaking duties. They buy the profound, momentary relief of being entirely selfish. We must ask ourselves, when a person who feels overwhelmed, inadequate, or entirely consumed by the needs of others seeks out a fleeting, anonymous physical release, is it truly just sex they are chasing? Or are they desperately using the language of sexuality to access a range of forbidden emotional experiences, escape, validation, control, and a brief reprieve from the crushing tightrope of modern life? If we take these behaviors strictly at face value, if we simply slap labels on people and condemn their actions as mere physical weakness, we drive the true aching vulnerabilities deeper underground. We prevent couples from having the terrifying, necessary conversations about the immense pressure they are placing on each other. True intimacy requires us to dismantle the illusion of the perfect, uncomplicated performer. It requires the immense courage to look at the person we love most in the world and admit our deepest insecurities, bringing our shadowed, complicated desires into the light and discovering how to merge the fierce tenderness of love with the wildness of lust in the very same room. Chapter 8. The Hierarchy of Betrayals. There is a widely accepted hierarchy of pain in our modern culture, an unspoken ranking of the ways we can wound the people we love. At the absolute top of this list, sitting on an undisputed throne of condemnation, is sexual unfaithfulness. We are taught that this specific breach of trust is the ultimate, unforgivable sin, a devastation that easily surpasses almost any other form of marital failure. When a partner strays, society swiftly issues a guilty verdict, branding them as the sole architect of the relationship's demise. But when we place this single transgression on such a towering pedestal, we risk creating a deeply flawed moral compass. We allow the glaring light of infidelity to completely blind us to the countless insidious ways people betray each other every single day in the dark. Imagine a relationship that looks perfectly stable from the outside, but behind closed doors, it operates under a regime of benevolent dictatorship. One partner systematically diminishes the other over the course of decades. They roll their eyes at their partner's ideas, mock their deepest fears, and patronize their ambitions. They control the finances with an iron grip, demanding receipts for every minor purchase and reducing an intelligent, capable adult to the status of a dependent child. The victim of this slow-drip emotional poison shrinks year after year, absorbing the daily insults and the chilling contempt. They begin to believe the narrative that they are utterly useless, completely unlovable, and incredibly lucky that anyone tolerates them at all. Then, one day, this diminished, exhausted person encounters someone else. This new person does not mock them. They ask for an opinion and actually listen to the answer. They offer a warm, lingering gaze instead of a cold critique. For the first time in a quarter of a century, the suffocated partner experiences the shocking, intoxicating sensation of human kindness. They step outside their marriage seeking the basic dignity that has been starved out of them. When the controlling partner inevitably discovers this hidden connection, their reaction is a masterpiece of righteous indignation. They seize the ultimate victim card, weaponizing the affair to justify an even crueler onslaught of insults. They proudly declare that despite their flaws, they never broke the sacred vow of fidelity. Society rushes to their defense, perfectly willing to overlook decades of psychological torment simply because the tormentor never slept with anyone else. But we must ask ourselves a terrifyingly honest question. Who truly committed the first betrayal? In a toxic swamp of emotional cruelty, intimidation, and disdain, stepping outside the relationship is not always an act of moral weakness. Sometimes trading the hands that strike for hands that caress is an incredibly courageous act of self-preservation. Fidelity, when demanded within the walls of a destructive environment, is often just a prettier word for captivity. It is entirely possible to remain perfectly monogamous while completely abandoning your partner. Consider the profound betrayal of displaced intimacy. Think of the partner whose primary, passionate relationship is with their career, their smartphone, or a substance. They are physically sitting at the dinner table, but their eyes are glazed over, relentlessly scrolling through screens or lost in a haze. The other partner spends years begging for connection, staging interventions, and fighting desperately for a single scrap of undivided attention. The pleas fall on deaf ears. The loneliness of sitting across from someone who has entirely tuned you out is a specific, agonizing kind of torture. When the neglected partner finally stops fighting, walks away from the table, and finds solace in the arms of a stranger who actually has the time to look them in the eye, the absent partner is suddenly outraged. They claim they have been betrayed, yet they have been emotionally unfaithful for years, consistently prioritizing a different mistress, be it work, alcohol, or the digital world, over the living, breathing human being right in front of them. Nowhere is this hierarchy of offenses more complicated than in the silent, agonizing desert of the sexless relationship. We are incredibly quick to condemn the partner who secretly transfers their physical desires outside the home. But we are far less willing to examine the partner who unilaterally decides that physical intimacy is permanently off the table, enforcing a mandatory celibacy on the person they claim to love. Picture the agonizing choreography of rejection that plays out in thousands of bedrooms every night. It starts with a hopeful, gentle advance early in the week. The advance is met with a subtle turning away, a heavy sigh, or a convenient complaint of exhaustion. By midweek, the seeking partner is terrified of initiating again, desperate to avoid the crushing humiliation of being explicitly turned down. They resort to dropping vague hints, hoping their partner will miraculously close the gap. By the weekend, the rejected partner feels entirely grotesque, profoundly unlovable, and physically starved. They retreat to the far edge of the mattress, drowning in a silent, seething resentment. This dynamic slowly poisons the well of affection. The partner doing the rejecting often feels an immense suffocating pressure, resenting the fact that their body is being demanded when they simply cannot muster the desire. They may truly love their spouse, value the family structure, and enjoy the deep companionship, but they fail to understand that reducing physical intimacy to an optional household chore fundamentally breaks the romantic contract. When the famished partner eventually seeks touch elsewhere, driven mad by the hollow echo of their own unmet needs, they are branded as the ultimate traitor. But when a relationship is entirely drained of its erotic lifeblood, and all desperate pleas for connection are met with a brick wall, the resulting infidelity is often an act of sheer survival. We must urgently dismantle the idea that remaining physically faithful is the only metric of a successful commitment. A relationship can be utterly destroyed long before anyone takes their clothes off in a strange room. By elevating physical infidelity above all other forms of cruelty, neglect, and abandonment, we grant abusive, indifferent, and rejecting partners a free pass to slowly suffocate the people they love, so long as they do it monogamously. If we truly want to honor the sacredness of a partnership, we have to recognize that protecting a relationship requires far more than just keeping your hands to yourself. It requires a relentless daily commitment to preserving the dignity, the spirit, and the vital beating heart of the person choosing to stand by your side. Chapter 9. The Hidden Triangle, the Lover's Perspective. Imagine standing by a window as the evening light fades, watching the street below. The table is perfectly set, 2 glasses are waiting, and the room is quiet with a heavy electric anticipation. You are waiting for someone who is already an hour late, but you will not call them because you are not allowed to call. When their car finally pulls up, your heart races with the same thrilling rush you felt on the very first day. You look like any other person, wildly in love, but in the eyes of the world, you are entirely different. You are the hidden third. You carry labels assigned by society that are heavy with judgment and scorn, words meant to reduce a complex human being into a simple predatory caricature. Because of those labels, you exist entirely in the shadows, sharing a profound, decades-long connection that will never see the light of day. When we talk about betrayal, the narrative almost always centers exclusively on the broken couple. The third person is either completely ignored or violently disparaged, treated merely as a symptom or a pathogen rather than a living, breathing human being. The cultural stereotype paints a picture of a naive, desperate youth or a calculated seducer intent on stealing someone else's life. But the reality is often strikingly different. Look closely at the hidden corners of these triangles, and you will frequently find individuals who are accomplished, pragmatic, and deeply self-aware. They are not simply lost souls taking whatever scraps of affection they can find. They are individuals who have made a conscious, albeit agonizing choice to live with a secret, and in many cases, to be the secret. To survive the crushing weight of illegitimacy, the hidden lover must become a master of emotional economics. They constantly negotiate an internal balance sheet, weighing what the official spouse receives against what they themselves are given. The rationalization goes like this. The spouse gets the public legitimacy, the shared holidays, the extended family, and the mundane daily companionship. But the lover believes they receive the absolute best of the person. They get the unfiltered passion, the deep intellectual connection, the uninterrupted romance, and the profound mutual respect. They convince themselves that while the spouse holds the legal contract, they hold the actual heart. This mental accounting is a survival mechanism, a way to maintain dignity and self-worth in an arrangement where they have absolutely no control over the distribution of resources. Yet, despite the brilliant justifications and the soaring highs of the secret rendezvous, the toll of remaining hidden is devastating. The lover lives in a state of suspended animation, vacillating wildly between feeling exquisitely adored and utterly ignored. There is a specific hollow pain in knowing you cannot call when you are lonely, cannot visit the hospital if they fall ill, and must smile politely at social events while pretending not to know the person who holds your soul. Imagine the excruciating reality of attending your lover's funeral, standing in the back of a crowded room, listening to eulogies about their devotion to their family, and possessing no right to publicly mourn the person you loved for 30 years. It is the profound trauma of being entirely disenfranchised, of knowing that when the relationship ends or tragedy strikes, your shared history will simply evaporate into nothingness, witnessed by no one. Over time, this dynamic often settles into a paralyzing holding pattern. The relationship lacks the security of a public commitment, but it possesses just enough comforting consistency to keep the hidden partner anchored. They are trapped in a state of stable ambiguity. The unfaithful partner continues to offer extravagant romantic gestures and whispered promises of a future together, stringing the lover along just enough to prevent them from walking away. They complain about their miserable marriage, fueling the lover's desperate hope that a grand exit is imminent. But years slip by. The lover watches their own youth, their potential for building a recognized family, and their freedoms slowly drain away while waiting for a life that was never actually going to materialize. When the crushing weight of the triangle finally collapses, the ending is rarely handled with grace. If the affair is discovered by the spouse, the immediate demand is usually a swift, brutal severing of all contact. The unfaithful partner, desperate to save their marriage, will often walk away from a years-long parallel love story without so much as a final conversation. The hidden lover is simply ghosted, left to interpret sudden silence as the final verdict on their worth. Or, perhaps worse, the ending is a slow, agonizing simmer, where the unfaithful partner gradually withdraws, sending fewer messages, arriving later, and slowly starving the connection until the lover is forced to walk away out of sheer self-preservation. To treat a human being as a disposable mistake to be deleted is a profound cruelty. If an illicit relationship must end so that a primary commitment can survive, that ending requires immense courage, care, and clarity. It demands a proper goodbye. The person walking away must look their secret partner in the eye, acknowledge the absolute reality of their shared feelings, and take full responsibility for the false promises that kept the illusion alive. Honoring the human connection does not mean justifying the deception. It means refusing to compound the damage. Until we summon the empathy to look at the third person in the triangle not as a monster, but as a complex heart capable of immense love and profound grief, we will never truly understand the devastating, majestic, and terrifying landscape of human desire. Chapter 10. Redefining the Rules of Ever After. We are raised on a diet of fairy tales and absolute certainties, fed the comforting illusion that love is a final destination. We are taught that if we find the right person, commit to them, and say the vows, a magical force field of fidelity will automatically descend over our lives, protecting us from the messy, chaotic realities of human desire. But when the storm of betrayal rips through a life, that force field shatters into a million jagged pieces. Standing in the rubble of a broken promise, staring at the debris of a shared history, we are forced to confront the terrifying truth that the blueprint we were handed was fundamentally flawed. The crisis of an affair is a violent dismantling, but it is also an unprecedented opportunity. It is the moment when a couple is forced to stop relying on assumptions and finally sit down to write their own rules. In the harrowing aftermath of discovery, a profound and subversive question almost always rises to the surface. Is it possible that our expectations were simply impossible to meet? When people realize that forced exclusivity did not protect their hearts, they begin to interrogate the very institution of monogamy itself. They look at the devastation and wonder if the rigid, unyielding borders of traditional marriage actually invite the trespassers they were designed to keep out. Imagine a couple sitting in the quiet wreckage of their living room, exhausted from months of weeping and screaming. For the first time, they begin to talk honestly about the crushing weight of trying to be everything to each other. They realize that their vows were not a living, breathing dialogue, but a silent, inherited script they accepted without question. They begin to explore the radical idea that commitment does not have to be synonymous with absolute sexual exclusivity. They recognize that borders are rigid, absolute walls that demand unquestioning obedience, while boundaries are fluid, adaptable spaces that respect the complex diversity of human needs. They decide to shift their relationship from a fortress into a sanctuary, creating a bespoke agreement where honesty replaces secrecy, and where acknowledging a partner's attraction to others is seen as a sign of trust rather than a threat to their survival. This does not mean that opening a relationship is a magical cure for a broken heart, nor does it guarantee immunity from future pain. Negotiated freedom is rarely as intoxicating as stolen pleasure, and human mischief will always find a way to test the limits of any arrangement. But the willingness to have the terrifying conversation about what fidelity actually means is a monumental step toward genuine intimacy. It allows a couple to recognize that loyalty, respect, and deep emotional constancy are the true bedrock of a partnership, and that sexual exclusivity is merely one of many possible expressions of that devotion. When the initial tempest of the affair eventually subsides, the relationship enters a critical new phase. The crisis has passed, but the legacy of the betrayal remains to be written. The way a couple metabolizes the trauma will dictate the entire future of their shared life. In observing the long-term fallout of these emotional earthquakes, three distinct paths tend to emerge from the wreckage. The first path is walked by those who become entirely trapped in the past. For these individuals, the affair is not a transitional crisis to be moved through. It becomes the permanent, defining epicenter of their existence. They share a cell in a marital prison, endlessly circling the same grievances, keeping a meticulous, bitter score of moral superiority. Every minor disagreement is instantly hijacked by the specter of the betrayal. The unfaithful partner is stripped of all redeeming qualities, reduced entirely to the sum of their transgressions, while the aggrieved partner adopts the permanent, impenetrable armor of the victim. They stay together, but they are emotionally dead, allowing the ghost of the affair to consume whatever oxygen is left in the room. The second path is taken by those who value the architecture of the life they have built more than the pursuit of romantic idealization. They are the pragmatists. They look at their children, their shared community, and their accumulated history, and they decide that the cost of dismantling the house is simply too high. They sweep the debris under the rug, patch the roof, and quietly return to the familiar status quo. They do not seek a massive transformation or a deep, probing interrogation of the human soul. They prioritize enduring loyalty and the comfort of the known over the turbulent roller coaster of passion. The affair becomes a dark, anomalous chapter that is firmly closed, buried in the past, and deliberately forgotten for the sake of preserving the family structure. But there is a third path, forged by those who allow the fire of the crisis to burn away everything that was false, complacent, and broken in their relationship. These couples recognize that their first marriage is dead and can never be retrieved. Instead of trying to resuscitate a corpse, they stand in the ashes and make the agonizing, courageous choice to build a second marriage together. These are the explorers. They do not use the betrayal as a weapon, they use it as a profound, albeit agonizing, catalyst for truth. The shock of the affair destroys the suffocating familiarity that had numbed them to each other, introducing a sudden, terrifying element of risk and mystery back into the dynamic. The fear of losing each other suddenly acts as a powerful spark, reigniting a combustive, desperate passion that had been dormant for decades. They learn to speak a new language, shifting from defensive accusations to a shared narrative of a crisis they survive together. They accept that love is inherently precarious, and that managing the tension between security and freedom is a lifelong thrilling endeavor. Yet, we must also acknowledge that sometimes the most honorable outcome of an affair is a graceful conclusion. We live in a culture that views every divorce as a catastrophic failure, demanding that couples stay together at all costs until the bitter end. But longevity is not the only metric of a successful relationship. When a connection has truly run its course, forcing it to continue only breeds contempt and cruelty. When the foundation is irrevocably shattered, the most profound act of love can be the willingness to let the other person go. Imagine a couple realizing that their chapter has come to an end. Instead of tearing each other apart in courtrooms and weaponizing their history, they choose to honor the life they shared. They sit down and write letters of separation, acknowledging the beautiful moments, the shared jokes, the children they raised, and the profound ways they shaped each other's lives. They mourn the loss of their shared future without degrading the reality of their shared past. They understand that ending a marriage does not erase its value. By saying a proper, dignified goodbye, they free each other to step into the future without the heavy chains of bitterness, allowing the legacy of their love to survive the death of their marriage. The profound lessons of infidelity are not just for those who have suffered its devastation. They are a roadmap for all of us who dare to love. We do not have to wait for the shock of betrayal to wake us from the slumber of domesticity. We can choose to bring the daring, attentive, and vibrant energy of the illicit into the sanctuary of the permitted. We can recognize that our partners do not belong to us, that their desires are a wild and sovereign territory, and that keeping love alive requires us to look at the person across the table and realize that there will always be more of them to discover. The ultimate rule of ever after is that it is not a destination we reach, but a masterpiece we must passionately, relentlessly create, day after fragile day.